Bashira some love. There's a lot of ways that we can get caught up in moments like listening to a song. And in community, the tradition that I've come from, maybe Bashira too, it's not it's participatory. Let's just say it that way. You know, the reason why Bashira comes up is not for a performance, though it may fall into the category of performance. The reason Bashira and musicians and artists are called forward is because it's one of the ways that we activate. All of us in various forms and experiences in life have experienced an activation. It's kind of that thing sometimes when you're younger and you hear a song and you're looking around and next thing you know you're shaking your tail feather. It's like, where did that come from? Didn't know I could do that. Your mama didn't know you could do that. Suddenly you're in dance class. Didn't know you wanted to do that. But now that's on a physical level, right? You know, you kind of sense something on a physical level. What we're doing is much deeper than that. What we're doing is the thing that activates the physical level. So there's the physical level that we have here, but behind that there's something else. There's something that is happening within us. There's a part of us that's awake, that's an aliveness. There's something that is going on that is behind what happens in the physical. Scientists are still trying to figure it out. Doctors, continue to practice medicine because they still have not figured out the human body to that degree to which they are able to say things with a level of certainty. And now that's with thousands of years of history of studying medicine. They still have not figured it out. Because I don't believe that you could figure out something like that unless you look at all of it. And so it is those physicians and it is those teachers that find these deep discoveries when they tap into something that is beyond their own intellect. Because before there was language, there was connection. Before human beings were writing, it wasn't a bunch of people walking around like, I can't say anything to you, so I don't even know what to think about you. And then over here, they would run into a tree and they just look at it. No, there was always something within us that was bubbling up. There was always something within us that had a yearning for discovery. There was always something within us. And it's not only rooted in churches and temples and mosques and synagogues and sacred territory. For some people, their holy temple is the ocean. I have a very, very close classmate. I'm in ministerial studies at Agape, and my friend Martin will often talk about how the only thing his Bible really seemed like it was good for would be to stand on it so he could reach onto the top shelf. Because that just wasn't a way that he entered in. Now, some people might consider that sacrilege. Some people might just consider it recycling. Some people might just consider it a part of the journey because I don't think anyone was hurt because he might have, and I don't know that he did, but that would be the example that he would always use. It never was really something that connected to him. And it would be really interesting for us to consider that there have been thousands and thousands of people that have, or not people, pathways that people have acknowledged as spiritual. Whether we categorize them as religion, whether we categorize them as pagan, whether we categorize them in any sort of way, there are ways that people recognize their connection to something beyond their fingertips. Something between each other. There's a certain sense and a certain connection, and it's not always romance. It's not always something familial. Sometimes there is something about a person that you meet, and there is everything about you that knows that you know them, but you have never met. These are things that most of us have experienced on some level, in some way, and yet the world that we live in seeks to try to categorize and be so absolute about those things which are truly unknowable, except for spiritually. So in the Bible, they talk often about there are things that can only be known from your consciousness. Now, that's not the word that they use. But the point is, you could try to understand the world by dealing only with it from the physical level. So a farmer is used to planting seeds, and crops come up from planting the trees. There are certain times of year that this does work for them. There's certain times of year that it doesn't work for them. And you think that you can kind of describe why it happens because you know the temperature, and you know that these seeds open at this particular temperature, and you know that these seeds do this particular thing when the moisture is such a thing. But how did all of those things decide that this is what happens when it all comes together? At some point in creation, whether it was an author, whether it was a creator, whether it was God, whether it's spirit, or whatever language you want to use, at some point there was an idea that when these forces were brought together, then this happened. This is not by accident. It's not by happenstance. It's so perfect, you have to step back and say, wait a minute, there is a pattern here. I don't know who set the pattern in motion, but I cannot decide that this pattern is an accident. It happens repeatedly. Every time we plant these seeds in the ground, every time we do this, every time we do this, this happens. Now, of course, there are different effects. Weather patterns change and things like that. But we have enough observable human history to have an idea that there's something more. You can call it God. You can call it spirit. You can call it whatever you want. But it is a thing. It is something more than just seeds, water, earth, chemicals, and minerals. So we look at all of that, and then we come into the idea of spirituality and teachings. And so we come into a space where we say, hey, we're at Soul Center. Our theme of the month at Soul Center is letting go. Like, Now, beyond the theme of the month, our topic for the day is, you've been set up, now live up to it. So what have we been set up for? So glad you asked. Has anybody ever heard of the idea of the birth lottery? Anybody ever heard that phrase before? So I was with a wonderful woman today, and over the course of the week, we were having some great conversation, and she's a teacher. She was visiting in town, and she was talking about one of the ways that she helps her students, she works with elementary school kids, understand things about the world, right? Let's just say she's trying to help the kids to understand the differences and the similarities and the advantages certain groups have over others. And one of the things she talked about is the birth lottery, right? So some of you were born into poverty, just abject poverty. The situation that you were born into where your parents or parent or the orphanage or the foster care system that you moved into was not something that you could control. It's a lottery. Now, some people are born into a country at a time of war. And there's absolutely nothing that they can do to control that. They were born at a time of war. That's some of our grandparents. That's some of our friends' grandparents. Some of our friends' grandparents are people who were a part of the Holocaust and were moved on those trains throughout Germany and Poland and Eastern Europe. Some people, their descendants, are the descendants of the kidnapped Africans out of Africa, who were taken to Cuba and were taken to the Dominican Republic and were taken to different regions of the world. So there's this idea of all of the situations that we were born into. And for some of us, that defines our existence. And so as we start looking at this idea of you've been set up, what I'm here to reveal and to make really clear is that no matter what condition you were born into, no matter what label somebody placed on your birth certificate, whether they placed a boy or a girl, because being male or female in different societies and different cultures also is a part of that birth lottery. That you can't control the society that you were born into and how they treat women and men differently. This is something that every human being has to reconcile in order to activate a level of compassion and appreciation for life itself. It is one of the gateways into gratitude. Am I making sense to you right now? You seem very attentive. I just want to make sure you're hearing me. And I appreciate your attentiveness. Because I was really caught up with this subject that Spirit was asking me to speak to. I was like, okay, well, we're talking about letting go. And let's see. I have let go of things in my life. But the challenge that eventually came to me is, once I let go, then what? If I'm holding on to the ladder and somebody's saying it's safer if you just let go, I have questions. I'm not really sure you're right. It's kind of high up here. But they're trying to let me know about something in this scenario that I can't see. And continually, Spirit is trying to get us to let go of things in situations because we cannot see. We cannot hear. We cannot know that if you keep holding on, it's like one of those scenes in a movie where the water is inching closer and closer and closer, and there's an electrical wire swinging back and forth, and if you don't let go, it's going to be electric. You need to let go! And I'm like, no! Okay. But then what? Am I going to brace myself and hurt when I hit the ground? Am I going to land safely because somebody is going to catch me? The reality is, if we're talking about letting go, we are simultaneously opening ourselves to receive. And you must have those things in your awareness simultaneously. So if you are a person that's struggling with addiction or addictive behaviors or patterns that you're wanting to break, if you let go of those things, the only way to truly stay released from them is to take on something else. The biggest problem is we've got all of this energy and this tension, this strength, whether it's chemically induced, whether it's just habitual in terms of our comfort zone, into holding on, that we will not take on another pattern, another thing that we strenuously hold on to that we trust. We may not know how. We may not know what we could put ourselves into that would have that much energy so that we wouldn't go back to it. And then sometimes we totally feel like it's out of our control. And so what I'm here to do is to talk again to that idea that no matter what situation you were born into, whether you're gay or straight or trans, whether you're black or white or Latino, whether you're Native American born, whether you're indigenous, whether you're of a darker complexion or a lighter complexion and you live in different parts of the country where everybody seems to speak the same language, but we just treat each other a little bit differently. No matter what, within you really is everything that you have to go through the journey without ever having to apologize for your birth. Now, some people, we're going through this change right now with things like the Me Too movement, things like Black Lives Matter, things like the court case with Judge Kavanaugh, and there are triggers that are coming up for all of us. Yeah, we talk about everything in here when I'm around. Let's be clear. Go there. Let's go. And we must be honest that it's challenging for us to figure out our way through it. But we don't abandon the journey just because it's difficult, and we don't take on victimhood just because we feel a little bit difficult in moving through it. One can only be dishonest if they cannot recognize the journey of this groups of people in countries. We're in America, so let's say it specifically. If you cannot acknowledge the oppressive journeys that people in America have gone through, you're just not being honest. That doesn't make it your fault or not. But we can acknowledge that people have gone through some bleep, 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 bleep stuff in America. And they still are. And I'm not here to make any of them victims of it. What I'm here to do is to be consciously aware that my energy and how I show up in the world and what I contribute into the world and what I speak and what I do and what I show is in integrity with a world that works for everyone. Yes. So my choices and how I show up and how I speak and the jobs that I take and the jobs that I turn down and the things that we do sacrifices in a world, and maybe people will never know.
Yes.
But it's not about people knowing whether or not I turned down an opportunity or I accepted an opportunity. People know who you are by how you move in the world, by what you speak to, and by what you are silent about.
Yes.
So, if you were taking notes and you were thinking about trying to figure out, well, what are the things that I should let go of? And where could I start in my life? The first one is excuses. Oh, none of y'all? None of y'all got no excuses? Anybody trying to figure out why they could not eat that cookie yesterday? Anybody figure out why they haven't done more to contribute to our government and the citizen in their role as citizens? Notice how universal that is. I did not pick a single side. But are you involved in your government? You see, they take advantage of the idea that we're so busy and that we work so hard, and it doesn't even matter what side of the aisle we're on. Are we involved in our government? They've given us the vote. Some of us had to take it, but we got it now. And so our engagement and our activity with it, what are we doing with it? And in certain communities, they feel really comfortable because they don't have to worry about it. But it's not even just an issue of liberal and conservative. Because universally, we should want, let's say, our veterans taken care of. And if you know anything about what's going on in our government and our system, plenty of excuses are being made for why there are constantly homeless veterans. Mostly because they're not getting the mental health issues supported. Now, this is not a partisan issue. All of us know somebody that served. All of us have family members that some people know they're just not the same. They're just not the same. And so why haven't we been doing this? It's because we as citizens, forget the senators, forget the presidents, forget the vice president, forget the people in Congress, we as citizens have not demanded that we care for those people who have said that they will go to these other countries and do what we do not want to do. We just haven't done it. It's an excuse. And so in general, you need to let go of your excuses. And then we talked about the birth lottery. One of the biggest challenges that we have is comparison. We have this practice of holding people up as the standard. And parents can be really funny with it. I know my dad was. Because on one hand, they'll say, well, if Johnny and Ricky jumped off of a bridge, would you jump off? But on the other hand, they'll say, Johnny and Ricky did the assignment, why didn't you do it? Hold on a minute. I'm confused. Which way am I going here? Because comparison is never the way. One of the biggest challenges, I'm not a parent, but I work with parents and I've seen kids and I'm a former teacher. But one of the biggest challenges for parents is you've got to realize you're not raising the kids for the world that you live in. Right? You're raising them for a future you know not of. And the education in this system, in this country, has been failing us. It hasn't even become close to raising kids up for the future and providing them with the information they need. So you must not compare Johnny to Jane. You must not even compare your children within your own house. You must allow them to reveal themselves. You want them to be good at math. You want them to be good at science. You want them to have knowledge and understanding. You want them to be able to comprehend things. You want them to be able to take something, translate it, maybe into another language, or just into their own understanding. How many of you still can't figure out why you read some of the books you read in school? Because they did a terrible job at helping us to understand, for example, geometry. Geometry is not about using it in the future. Geometry is about understanding that there are rules and laws that you can discover to solve problems. That's it. more than anything, if you can figure out that there are ways to approach patterns and questions, you get that, notice, from math. Oh, really? Yes. Yes, Billy, really. And some people do take the geometry and they are the next NASA scholars because they go on to algebra and calculus and all these other things. But it's about creating pathways in the mind. We've just gotten stuck into a certain way that it's supposed to look, and then we test for it. As if that's the best way. It's a way. It's not the best. So we're releasing expectations. We're releasing comparison. I'm not even talking about comparing people how they look. I'm not comparing finances. I'm not comparing houses. We know to let go of those things, and we still haven't let go of them yet. What else? We start talking about letting go of expectations. It is so essential that you release any idea of something being or someone being other than it is. We're talking a lot about voting in the atmosphere in our country, in the elections coming up. And I was having conversations with people who were talking about the fact that the young people still don't really understand the civil rights movement and how it unfolded. I shared something on Facebook the other day where people just don't realize that hundreds and thousands of people were killed in situations like this, or that soldiers who had signed up were killed in situations like this, or that African Americans come from a legacy of people who have endured something uniquely in particular, and that it has a residual effect. So the patterns that we enter the world with are different than our Latino brothers and sisters, that are different than our Asian brothers and sisters, that are different than immigrants, that are different than our white brothers and sisters. It's just different. And so having an understanding with that then helps us change how we dialogue. It helps us change how we deal with situations. The idea that somebody's doing something annoying that we call the police is so problematic. Yes. It's because you are not willing just to go talk to somebody. Amen. What? You mean they're making some noise? Go talk to them. Probably should have been talking to them. You probably should have been talking to your neighbors. You probably should have had an idea of who lives next to you. Homework assignment number 1. You're going to talk to somebody in your neighborhood, in your apartment, in your complex that you've seen all the time. How many people see people all the time where they live and do not know a name? Raise your hand. That's everybody. Come on. Stop playing. We're doing this together. You don't need to become pen pals. Yeah, I actually talked to a lady that she actually has had a pen pal for like 25 years. But it's just so sweet, right? That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to be a presence that's simply open. And that will say, hi, I'm Jason. I live in an apartment, or I live down the street and I just see you all the day. All I just wanted to say is hi. No expectation of anything back. You don't need that lemon cake recipe yet. You ain't earned it. But you're just going to go out and do that. Yes? Yes. Can you do that? Yes. Is that reasonable? Yes. Does that make the world a better place? Yes. You can move the needle a little bit? Yes. All right. Thanks. So we're letting go of expectations, comparison, and excuses. But what did I say at the beginning? Got to take things on if we're letting things go. So I've got 3 more things for you. I know your plate's full, but you're ready, yes? Yes! So one of the biggest things that people who are in spiritual community have to take on is, what is this thing that I'm really taking on? What does it mean to be a part of a New Thought, Ancient Wisdom community? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be Muslim? Some of these teachings are really clear in terms of what they want the people who are in their teaching to be. And unfortunately, in these communities, New Thought, we don't talk explicitly about it enough. So what I'm inviting us to do, the first thing is, come to an understanding of spiritual principles and spiritual qualities. Everybody say that. Spiritual principles, and qualities. So I'm going to give you one. And if you spend your whole life on this one principle, it would change your world. And And that principle is simply, God is all there is. Everybody just say that. God is all there is. You mean famine? God is there? Yes. Because his presence is everywhere. Now the thought that comes along with that is, God did that. No. You see, the unfolding of the universe, before these things happen, there's a natural course and a natural ebb and flow. When you talk about farmers and farming, they rotate their crops because there's an awareness that you can actually strip all of the minerals out of the soil so that later nothing will grow there. But you learn that over time. So it does have a balance in the universe. Forest fires are not always caused by human activity, and they are an essential part of the evolution of the ecosystem. How do you know that? When a lightning strike hits a forest and it goes into a blaze, the fire and the ash and everything actually goes into the soil, and it's not that nothing can grow there, it's something completely different is being nurtured and gestated in that soil and transformation. Look it up. I know it sounds crazy, but it's real, right? So, a spiritual principle, God is all there is. So that's your second homework assignment, right?
Yes.
First homework assignment, say hello.
Talk to your neighbor.
Talk to your neighbor. It could also be a neighbor at work, right? Like some of us live in a kind of an exclusive place, so we don't really interact. You know, maybe we live on a farm. We've been talking a lot about farming today. But you could also be a neighbor at work, somebody you ride the elevator with all the time, and you just never said hello to, and you just introduce yourself. But the other thing is, we've got our spiritual principle, now our quality. Now, divine qualities, spiritual qualities, are qualities that do not have an opposite. So when we talk about love, there is no opposite to love. Hate is not the opposite of love. An absence of love looks like apathy, right? So it looks like apathy, but there is no opposite. Because a lot of times what's really happening is hate and those types of things are really just a cry. Of course, in Miracles often talks about this, and I don't know the exact quote, but that these things are a cry for love. So there is a part of a person who is hateful that recognizes connection. It's so weird, but they do. That there's something about them that knows that there's a feeling, and they've translated it, and this is very rudimentary description of it, but they translate it as hate and opposition. But if there is something that I can actually say, you, as soon as I've done you, Alicia, we're connected. That's it. Now we can say whatever we want, but it's still a connection. And so if there is connection there, there's life there. There's life there. God is there. If God is there, absolutely love is there. So the awareness becomes that I am never separated from anyone. And so we just continue to explore this, and we continue to recognize this idea that God is all there is. We continue to explore the reality of love and peace and harmony and joy. You can pick any one of these qualities and explore, right? So the other thing is, and I'm going to wrap up really quickly, is the theme again, the topic is you've been set up. Now live up to it. One of the biggest, coolest ideas that I've heard is, and recently it sounds a little different, is how important it is not to be sedentary. You know, I was reading an article over the past week, and it was saying that a sedentary lifestyle, basically one that is very still, that you're not very active, is worse than eating junk food all the time and smoking. Wow. Yeah. Think about all of the mechanics. Everybody kind of knows how a car works. It requires lubrication. It requires oil. It requires a filter for all that. All that stuff's going on in the car. The human body, oh my God, it's the same thing. Your lungs are the filter for all the things that you breathe in. Your liver is filtering all the stuff that goes into your body. And when you're not moving, it begins to slow down. It begins to harden. It begins to get stiff. It's why something as simple as going for a walk can change your life. And so we're going to walk these principles out. You know, it's essential that you live up to this. And so we let go of excuses, we let go of all of these other things, comparison, we let go of all of that. And we're living up to an active and engaged life. So we're